Welcome to Kevin Deal Photography, where I take you on my journey through photography. On today's episode, I'm going to be doing an in-depth review of the Exprotrek UHD 4K action camera. Welcome to today's episode. If you're not familiar with Kevin Deal Photography, I do gear reviews, tips, techniques, and tutorials, and I dive into film. If any of that sounds appealing to you, click the subscribe button below. The Exprotrek 4K action camera has some pretty impressive specs for the price. It has a touchscreen, two screens, one on the back, one on the front, EIS stabilization, a 170-degree ultra-wide-angle lens. It's IP68 rated for waterproof housing at up to 40 meters or 130 feet. Has a wireless 2.4 gigahertz remote control. The maximum quality on it is 4K 60 frames per second on video. They have a stills camera that goes up to 20 megapixels, and you can put a 128 gigabyte micro SD card in it. It also has an HDMI port so you can connect it to your TV. It also comes with 2 batteries. And now to the price. The Exprotrek 4K action camera comes in at a price of about $110 US. At the time of this recording, I'm seeing that there's a $40 off coupon on Amazon. So I've been looking for a really small camera for a little bit. So I looked at some popular solutions out there like GoPro, but it was just a little too expensive for me. I already own a ton of cameras and I've spent a lot of money on those cameras. And so if I'm getting another camera, I just want something small, something light that can do B-roll, record me with behind the scenes as I'm doing instructional stuff for this YouTube channel. And right around the time I was doing that research, I was approached by Exprotrek, and they had asked me to do a review of their new UHD 4K action camera. And so I want to say, in the interest of transparency, that I was given this product for free and that I am going to be doing a review in exchange. But as always, my reviews are independent and my opinions will be my own. I'm going to tell you everything I like about this camera and everything that I don't like about this camera. As I said, my expectations for the action camera are that I can use it for B-roll, use it for behind the scenes, use it when I don't want to carry a bunch of stuff in my bag. Because right now I'll take like my Fuji or my Canon R5, and then I'll have to take like a second large body with me. I mean, I do have a Fuji XS10, which is a smaller camera, but this is even smaller. So, smaller sometimes is better and more convenient. It looks like I can fit it in my pocket, which is awesome. So let's dive into what's in the box. Okay, so let's see what we have in the box here. It says right here on the front that it's a dual color screen display. So it looks like you got one on the front and one on the back. We got ourselves our manual. I'm not huge in unboxing videos, but I know a lot of you watching this are probably curious because this is a consumer gadget. So the camera is super small. Look at that. I mean, that is tiny. It's like the size of my 77 millimeter lens cap. I can hide this thing with my 77 millimeter lens cap that fits on top of my Canon lens. That's tiny. That's really cool. So looks like we've got some plastic on here. Really cool. Looks like this is the housing for the underwater aspect of it. I'm curious to know what aperture and focal length the lens is at, so we'll check it out. And look at this, they were nice enough to give you 2 batteries. I got very expensive cameras that only come with 1 battery, so that's pretty cool. You get this little ribbon thing right here for pulling it out. That's pretty convenient. Now let's see what kind of accessories they give us. There are all sorts of just accessories and gadgets that I'm gonna need to go through. Probably won't even use most of these, but if you're an accessories person, I think you're gonna be in luck, because it literally comes with any kind of accessory. And this right here, this is the wrist controller. So these buttons on here, you connect this to your wrist, you push the buttons, you can turn the camera on and off, control it, hit record. It's a pretty cool accessory to have. That's the unboxing. It comes with quite a few accessories, and so far I'm very impressed with the tiny size of this, but let's go see what kind of quality it can give us. A lot of the reviews you will see of this product are of people who do a lot of action sports, people who are, putting it on their kayaks, their surfboards, putting it on their helmet when they ride their bikes. And so I'm gonna do a different review of this product today. I am going to review this product as a photographer, and I'm gonna be paying a lot of attention to the image quality, not only of the video, but of the stills. I'm gonna be very picky about what I see. I'm gonna be very honest and very blunt about what I see. It has to be up to the standard of my work. Even though I'm mainly going to relegate this camera for B-roll footage and behind the scenes footage, it still has to be up to my standard. So let's go take this guy out into the field and see what kind of results we can get from him. I took it to the streets of downtown Round Rock near my house. It shoots in JPEG, so if you move these highlight sliders around, if you blow out highlights, obviously it's a JPEG, so if you're using JPEGs, whites are gonna turn into gray once you blow them out, so you may wanna err on the side of underexposing your shots. Just remember that outside of ISO, this camera works in full auto, so you have no control over shutter speed and you have no control over aperture, which may drive some of you nuts. I have my expectations calibrated like very realistically. It's a $100 camera. I just needed to get some different perspectives that I can't get on my own sometimes. So let's check out our shadow recovery. We'll move the shadow slider over and see what kind of noise we can pull out of the shadows. I am also at 400%, so this right here, let me get it to 100. This is 100% right here. So, I can kind of see some noise. And remember, the shadows are lifted up all the way here. And you shouldn't lift the shadows up that much. Let me turn the exposure up a little bit right there. So when I'm looking at it, that's an acceptable look. Maybe bump the contrast up a little bit. That's just how I like it. The highlights are a little more blown out than I want them to be on a blue sky day, but in general, this isn't bad. Little highlight blowout here, and then obviously there's some distortion. So to manage your expectations, you're not buying this 20 megapixel camera to replace your Canon R6. This isn't competing for Canon or Sony or any of those crowns that are out there for best cameras in the world. It's an action camera, and for that purpose, it'll do just fine. But I just wanted to see what the photo quality is, to kind of figure out what the shutter speed is. So I tried the 10 frames per second, so you can do burst mode. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Oh, actually it was 9, but these are cars that are turning, so they're not going very fast. But I also did some shots of some cars going by, real fast, like 45-mile-an-hour type stuff, because I wanted to see where motion blur kicked in. And so this was at 10 frames per second. So when I zoom in here, you can see a little bit of motion blur in the wheels, which leads me to believe that the max shutter speed on this is somewhere around 1/200th of a second. According to this EXIF data, everything's at 1/200th of a second at ISO 100, but I don't believe that, because if you take the Sunny 16 rule, like if I'm out here, like if I were at ISO 100 at 1/100th of a second, to get a shot like this, I would need to be at f16. So I'm not trusting this EXIF data, but perhaps the 1/200th of a second is on, because when I went to the 10-shot burst mode, and I started looking at cars going by. So right here, you can see some motion blur on the front wheel. So that would be kind of in your, 1/200th, maybe 1/500th. But if it was 1/1000th, this car's going 45 miles an hour. So if a car's going 45 miles an hour and you're at 1/1000th of a second, I would say that these wheels would be a little more frozen than that, especially at 1/2000th of a second. So maybe 1/200th of a second is correct on that. But like for instance, when I go to I took this shot right here, If this were at f2.6 and I were that close, I would expect to see a little bit more bokeh in the background. So I'm not buying that this is 2.6. I'm also not buying that this is 2.3 millimeters unless it had some insane crop that was beyond like micro four thirds. I don't know enough about the sensor on this, so I can't comment on that, but my test I did earlier where I took a shot of this, I found this to be about on par focal length wise with my 14 to 35 at about 15 or 16 millimeters. So it's presenting an image that looks like it's about 16, 15 millimeters in full frame. Also, being that it's an ultra wide angle lens, there's not heavy vignetting, which leads me to believe that this is some sort of a massive crop sensor. If you're taking serious photographs with the action camera, I recommend putting it in manual ISO mode. That way you can control the exposure and slightly underexpose it so you can get results like you see right here. So in this image, I underexposed it a little bit, and I just pulled up the shadows a little bit. And when I did that, I preserved my highlights. I think that the picture is very workable in post, even though it's not a raw file. To take this photo, in my opinion, to the next level, I would bump the contrast up a little bit when I shoot street photography. I tend to like a little bit more contrasty images. And then I'd maybe go over to my styles, navigate to my streets punchy preset that I use in Capture One. They call them styles. And then I take a look at this image. I think this looks pretty good. I might need to do a little bump up of the shadows, maybe increase the exposure a little bit. But overall, I think this is a really cool shot. If I were to put it on Instagram right now, nobody's gonna go, what camera did you take that on? They're just gonna go, oh, that's a really cool shot. That guy's bike is badass. And it was, and he was kind enough to let me take his picture. So anyway, this is the final image of that, the final edit of that. Now let's check out how the action camera does with time-lapse photography. The time-lapse is pretty cool. These all worked around 4 times speed. I thought they looked pretty fantastic. On the other side of the time-lapse spectrum, we have slow motion built into the camera as well, and I think it does a fine job, as you can see right here. One of the reasons the action camera appealed to me is I wanted to put it on my camera so I could get a unique and cool perspective of when I'm shooting and using my lenses. This seems to look pretty cool to me, so mission accomplished. So to turn it on, all you have to do is hit this guy right here, hold it down, and the screen will turn on just like that. When you hit the button on the top, it'll start recording, so that's pretty easy. Hit the button again, it turns off. Now keep in mind this is a touch screen, so you can go in here. This is your resolution, so you got 4K, 60 frames per second, 2.7, 30 frames per second. You can do 1080p 120, 1080p 60, 30. They have 720 as well, all the way from 30 to 240. So I don't see 240 too often. I typically will record at 30 frames per second is fine for me. I don't really do a lot of stuff that requires 60. So EIS. This is a mode, it's electronic image stabilization. They also have a distortion correction that I saw as well. You also have white balance control, so if it's like a cloudy day, incandescent lighting, fluorescent lighting, they have different modes for that. Sunny, auto, there's an exposure setting, so if for some reason it doesn't read the exposure correctly, you can actually make things darker and brighter. For you photographers out there, that's kind of like your exposure compensation. There's metering modes. Average, center, and spot. If you're a photographer, there's also matrix metering. If you're a photographer, you should know what all these are. If you're not, probably just leave it on average. And then when you go to the wrench icon, there's an image rotation thing. You can turn Wi-Fi on and off. You can reset the Wi-Fi, put in your Wi-Fi information. So all pretty self-explanatory stuff there. It's just like your power settings. When it's gonna auto power off, you can turn the sound on and off. There's a time format setting in there. It's also where you format your card. I don't want to format my card right now because I actually have some information on there that I have yet to transfer, so I don't want to do that. You can also factory reset it if you want to. So that's all pretty self-explanatory. To go back, you just hit the back button. You also have the ability to switch very quickly just by swiping down. You have some settings like your audio settings. You can lock it, power. When you swipe up, there's some other modes you got in there, video. slow, loop, lapse, photography, auto, burst, and timer. I'm not really sure how many people are going to use burst mode. I doubt you're going to be trying to capture someone run the 100 meter in the Olympics with this thing, but it's cool to have. If you hit this button right here, where it kind of looks like a YouTube icon, you hit that, it'll take you into playback mode. So if you want to watch your videos that you just made, that's where you do that. So, you know, if you want to go quickly into photo mode, now I'm in photo mode. My power is at less than 30% because I haven't actually changed the battery on this. I've had the battery in this for about a week, so it lasts a while, which is kind of cool. Something that you want to do immediately, unless you want to do this, is the time watermark. You want to turn that off. And the reason why is because it'll put a timestamp in the upper left of your video. Now, if you care about that, that's fine. But as somebody who does professional video, I don't want the timestamp up there because it just gets in the way. You have an ISO auto, and it goes from 100 ISO all the way up to 6400 ISO. If you're a professional photographer, you can probably mess with this. If you're not, you may want to just leave it in auto. But if you don't know what this means, this is how sensitive the sensor is to light. The more sensitive you make it to light, the more the noise you see in the shadows. And that's common of all cameras. So you typically want to leave this low. But if you're not really experienced and you just want to have fun with this thing, just put it on auto. Has a long exposure mode when you're in photography mode where you can set it up to 30 seconds. But that's pretty much it as far as the settings are concerned. So cool stuff. Let's get out of here. My battery's low. I'm going to switch it back over to video mode. You have both a front and a back screen on the action camera. When you hold that button down, you get the front screen. So, hello. Hold it down again. And you get the back screen. Pretty easy. So overall operation is pretty easy. It's easy to get around. I showed you some photo examples of it. Now let's check out some video examples of it.
All right, so I'm doing a selfie test on this bad boy. It's 1080p, 60 frames per second. Got the audio going. We'll listen to the audio quality. You can tell me if you think the audio sounds good.
One omission from the action camera is it does not have a jack for an external microphone. So if you have a favorite microphone that you want to use with this, you can't. The internal microphone built into it is okay for narration and things like that for high adventure sports, but it's not going to be to the quality of a premium third-party microphone. Here's an example of me walking with the action camera with no EIS or image stabilization versus with image stabilization. And as you can see, it's much more smooth and it's a great feature to have.
I have the EIS on right now. I'm walking around with it. I'm testing out the microphone. If there's something that I am immediately like, hey, I'd like to see them fix, is I'd like to see a meter. I would like to see my levels. But another thing I want to show you is, here, let me take a picture. You can see your tally light and all that. So that's the view of what you see, which is really cool. I don't like the fact that after about 30 seconds or so, or a minute or so, the front screen turns off. I don't want the front screen to turn off because I want to see my tally lights. I want to see that I'm at 1080, 60 frames per second, and then I see my countdown to how many seconds of time I have left. But the front screen, after a certain amount of time, it shuts off. So I would recommend you go into your power saving settings and just turn that off. You don't want to not see your screen. I mean, they do give you 2 batteries with it, so.
You really can't have an IP-rated waterproof camera without testing the waterproof capabilities. So I went ahead and put the action camera in the waterproof housing, and then I tossed it around inside the jacuzzi, had some fun with it, and put it up against the jets, tried out different modes, tried roughing it around in the water a bit. There's no doubt in my mind that if you use this camera in extreme environments where there's lots of water and currents and things like that, that it'll hold up just fine. I thought the waterproof housing performed admirably. And now let me give you my final thoughts on the Exprotrek action camera. All right, so what are my final thoughts on the Exprotrek action camera? Well, for the money, you really can't beat it. $110 somewhere in there. You get 4K, 60 frames per second. Now, it's true you can only do the EIS stabilization at 1080p, but that's actually quite normal. Most cameras with internal stabilization have to oversample and then crop. So the fact that it does 1080p EIS is normal. It's honestly no different than how expensive cameras work in that regard. I love the accessories they give you for it. I love the fact that it's IP rated. You can just toss it in the water. You don't have anything to worry about. The camera built into it's really cool. So what do I not like about it? Well, there's a few things. I find it's really hard to get the micro SD card in and out. Sometimes I have to use like a screwdriver or something, unless you have long fingernails. I don't have long fingernails, so getting the card in and out is not a pleasant experience. By default, they put a timestamp in the upper left of your videos and your still photography. I wish that wasn't even a feature at all, because I don't want to see timestamps in the upper left corner. Now, you can turn that off. I just wanted to make sure that you knew that if you bought this camera and you saw a timestamp in the upper left of your videos and your stills photography, that you have to go into the menu and actually turn that off. The microphone on it is okay. It's nothing amazing, but it's good enough. I would put that under a negative because I'm an audio engineer. But that's really it. For the money, though, like the positives far outweigh the negatives. I can recommend this if you need a good camera to just capture some stuff that you're going to be putting up on the web, like YouTube or maybe Facebook or Instagram. It's not going to give you camera quality of like a motion picture film or anything like that. You still have to buy a camera that costs several times more than this to achieve that kind of quality. But for its size and its class, I'd say it does a pretty darn good job of quality, and it's an excellent value. And I do recommend you get it if you fall under that criteria. So that's my review today. I hope you learned something. I appreciate all your likes, comments, suggestions on this channel. If you like what you saw, click the subscribe button below. I appreciate your support. Until next time, I'll talk to you soon. Bye.